Now, we'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker, Joel Hansen. He's a Vancouver based marketing advisor, a two-time TEDx speaker, and storyteller, recognized as one of Vancouver's top 30 influencers to follow. Our DECA Ryerson president, Nicholas Ramsmeer, will be moderating the keynote. Please give a warm welcome to Joel Hansen.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to dig into this amazing session together. I'm actually here a couple hours outside of Vancouver in a mountain town called Whistler. And it's super awesome just to connect online and share with everyone here a couple ways I've kind of grown myself as a young professional, but also a couple ways I'd like to share with you how when we use technology and social media in a unique way, there can just be some incredible things that can happen in our career and in the ideas that we explore. So I'm excited to dig into 5 reasons why by starting to create content and a personal brand, you can truly increase your ability to grow your career, but also just the way you use social media as a professional. So thanks for having me. Before we get going, I wanted to share a bit of my story. Like you, I attended university, grew up in a family that was very outdoorsy and social and team building focused, and naturally I was drawn toward the business degree as that kind of fell in suit with what I wanted to do. And into my second or third year, I really did enjoy my classes, but I then kind of fell into the world of social media and identified that as amazing as class is, a degree at university doesn't guarantee us a job in the marketplace. And it was in my second or third year of university where I really started creating habits and new ways of thinking to see how I could use social media to actually line up opportunities in my own life to learn about the world around me. And so my message today that I like to dig into is stop waiting and start creating. I think we're all bombarded by a lot of online messages on these devices you probably have right beside your iPad or laptop. But I think instead of creating a habit of consumption, whether that's watching Netflix, Instagram Live, or whatever it might be, I challenge you with these 5 reasons to start creating content versus just consuming it. So rule number 1, or reason number 1, is we all have a personal brand, whether we know it or not. Jeff Bezos at Amazon, you've probably heard of that guy. He claims your personal brand to be what you are when you're not in the room, what people talk about you in context. And so it could be your character, your personality, your skills, your projects, all things that everyone on this video today will have in their own life. And the power of starting to share those things online, whether that's an Instagram portfolio of your artwork, a LinkedIn series of interviews, or even a podcast, they can all pull out things that you're able to showcase as a professional before you ever get a job. And so my challenge to you for reason number 1 is start investing in your own personal story and your own personal brand, because whether you've started or not, people will get to know you and your story as you enter a career. Point number 2, employers are drawn to your personal story and they can validate that with your resume. As important as a resume is, and your GPA and your extracurricular, people connect with stories and they're drawn to personal why statements for what makes your heart beat as a human. And so whether you're trying to connect with a top accounting firm, a local startup, or even one of your alumni, I encourage you to document what your 1-sentence personal why statement is and have your content and your personal brand connect and extend to what that 1 sentence is. when you get up in the morning or when you wanted to finish your degree, what's the one sentence that makes your heart beat for why you want to go into the world of business, communications, arts, or whatever it might be? Figure out that one sentence and make sure you have a story that you can share with your employer versus just a 1 or 2 page resume. Because at the end of the day, people are drawn to a story that they can connect.
It being online.
No worries.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, yeah, if this was an interview, I guess I would have to jump back on with the HR manager. So it's a good live test in motion.
Yes.
Most definitely. And I will let you continue.
Perfect. Is it okay if I carry on with point 4, or how are we for time?
Yes, most likely.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So point number 4 is social media content is the new form of resume. As powerful as our resumes are, they lack the ability to visually convey to an employer or company the stories that we have as professionals. If we were to give a one-piece resume to an HR manager versus a link to a website, an app, an interview series, or even a live webinar like DECA put together, it showcases a lot more character and personality that the employer can then validate in your professional world. And so if you're taking notes or tuning back now that I'm here, think in your own life, what are projects or other unique stories you have that you can pull from your resume and put onto social media to build out your story as a professional. And then point number 5 is get comfortable meeting with inspiring people and sharing your story. A lot of the working world is people and idea management. And my challenge to you is start identifying the people in your industry that you'd like to meet with so that you can start having those conversations online or in real life. Because a lot of the work we do in the professional world is connecting with people. And if we're able to share our story well and understand the things that make them inspired as an individual, our relationships and our community will be that much more effective when we have to enter a new career or possibly take on a new project. And so I inspire you, even if you don't know necessarily what you're wanting to do in the professional world, start trying to learn from and gather other inspiring information or stories from the world around you. Through these tools like YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, I know all of you know how to use them effectively. And you're probably teaching your parents and your grandparents how to use them. But now taking the next step is learning how you can channel these tools we have on social media to connect and share a story that can draw you closer to a career opportunity. And I'm more than happy to answer questions and how that I've done that in my own life. But I think we'll hand it off to Nick to hear the questions he has that we can get into those next steps.
Great. Thanks so much, Joel. I really appreciate you giving those 5 tips. I think those are really useful. I just want to start off by asking, why should people listen to you and what kind of people should be listening to you? Because we've had a lot of speakers this weekend, and we wanted to make sure you were our keynote speaker because we really appreciated how much value we think you could bring. So why should all of our attendees be listening to you today?
Yeah, great question. And I don't know if I, feel super comfortable selling them on why they should listen, but I think a good reason is instead of giving up the internet connection, I came back and switched technology to give the rest of this talk. So that's point number 1 for you. Point number 2 would have to be, I think I have a good grasp on understanding what you're going through as students because I was there only a couple of years ago. I'm not a 40 or 50-year-old professional that's been doing this for a couple decades, but I'm actually someone relatively new to the professional world that as a result of using technology and social media, I've come from a very non-traditional, non-expertise background, and I've been able to build a community that continues to provide unique opportunities. And that's, I think, something I love sharing with other people to get them inspired as their students.
Okay, perfect. I think that's great. And I totally agree. I mean, I know the answer to that, but I think you are such a social media expert, if I do say so myself. And I really think you can add a lot of value to this. And kind of going off that point, during these times, everyone knows we're stuck at home. This is our first virtual conference that we've had to hold. And so far, it's been amazing. So during these times, what do you think us as students or recent grads, what can we do to search for a job? What are the ideal platforms for us to search for a job? And what steps do you recommend that we take?
Yeah, great question. I think in the digitally noisy world we're in today, your chances of going the traditional route of submitting a resume, crossing your fingers, and hoping that you get an interview are very low. However, the advice I would want to give is start cultivating your own coffee and networking meetings with professionals at these companies to hear about unique opportunities before the job's ever posted online. So my tip would be start being visible online, specifically LinkedIn. And my next step would be start researching the projects, the careers, and the opportunities in your area, whether that's Toronto, accounting, finance, HR, and start trying to genuinely connect with the hiring managers outside of the recruitment process to have a conversation with them. So a couple practical tips I'd share with that would be connect with alumni from Ryerson and hear, how did they get to PwC? How did they get to work at Starbucks? How did they get that first internship at Shopify? Start surrounding yourself with alumni and professionals that have shared values with you and ask what steps advice they would give to approach that same path. But I think if you're just applying the traditional route of putting your resume in a list of 300, your chances will be quite low. But if you're able to connect, gather stories, catch up for phone calls, and attend webinars like this, I think by taking daily steps forward, you'll be surprised with how much progress you can have over time.
Okay, I totally agree with that. I know for me personally, I've talked to a lot of people, and some of them will say, yeah, my first co-op was working at PwC, working at Deloitte. Or some other people might be like, yeah, my first co-op turn was working at Ryerson. So I think there's a lot of variability there, but I think that always is a great head start. So I know you mentioned LinkedIn, and that's a great place to start. And I think if everyone here doesn't already have LinkedIn, they should get a LinkedIn. But what are some strategies that we can use on LinkedIn? What are some tips that you think are good ways to not only connect, but make sure your message is seen and responded to?
I think a couple points with this would be, in a higher level, you have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and they are very saturated with content. So it's a very busy platform. So if you're to share a message on those networks, it's very difficult to have your message seen. LinkedIn, on the higher end, only about 5% of people on the platform post content on a weekly basis. And so your chances of getting your message seen here versus here are dramatically higher. So that's just kind of that first overview if you're taking notes to say, why should I spend time on this platform? The other reason is LinkedIn is positioned with decision makers and professionals that make decisions based on your higher ability. And so my encouragement to you would be start getting comfortable just seeing how the platform operates. My couple tips with taking that next step would be try and message one alumni or inspiring person with a personal note each day or each week. Try and get in a habit of starting to reach out and ask questions. Point number 2 would be create a project, interview series, or community initiative that gives you a reason to work with these inspiring people. For me, it was hosting marketing interviews, or it was even hosting conferences like this. And I would reach out to inspiring professionals to ask if they might want to be involved in an interview or if they might want to be involved in the conference. Point number 3 is be encouragement focused. Don't get lost in the thought that you need to get a job from them in the first day or even the first month. Relationships, just like in personal life, if you're here with a friend today, they're not based on one day, 1 week, or 1 month. The relationships we have are usually 10 years, 30 years, or hopefully for the rest of our life. And I encourage you to see a professional network that same way. How can you build rapport and build a good relationship and not ask for a role right away on the first message? So those are my 3 tips.
Okay. Just kind of going off of that, when you're saying to reach out to people and try and connect with these people, do you find people are more responsive or less responsive during 2020, during the times when we're all inside? How are you finding it different? And what are some things that you think we can adjust, some adjustments we can make?
That's a great question. So to highlight one thing that everyone on this call has, I narrow it down to 2 words: student charisma. All of you have this beaming smile, and I can see it on Nick's face, and I see it on Celine's and Tara's. You have this beaming energy, smile, and desire to change the world. And you should never lose that. When you get into the professional world, you'll be given a sheet of paper or an email that says, Jimmy, Susan, Nick, these are your objectives, and you need to do this for the company. And when you're a student, before that happens, step into this charisma of not knowing what you're going to do with your life. And to be honest, professionals still have that. But step into a charisma of being curious, asking good questions, and looking to hear people's stories, because you never know where that can lead. And the best part is when you reach out as a student, people know that you're not trying to sell them something and you're not trying to, do something out of the ordinary. You're just trying to learn. And so my challenge to you would be, when you reach out with this student charisma, be specific, be genuine, and do your research. When you send a message, do you know where they attended university? When you send a message, have you listened to their latest podcast? When you send a message, how are you being creative to ensure that when they read the note, they know that you as a student are going to spark a different thought and something that they haven't seen before?
That's really great. I definitely agree with that. I know there's been lots of times where, you see all these people on LinkedIn, you see all these people on social media, and they seem so high up. You're like, how is there any chance they're going to read my stuff? And I know you have a few stories like that. So I was wondering if something you talked about before is sowing seeds of kindness. I was wondering if you wanted to share that story.
Yeah, for sure. So I have a mentor of mine that I actually met at university, and he's the kind of person that, when I take him out for coffee or lunch, it's, you just never feel like it's quite enough. And maybe you have that with your parents or a mentor, friend of your own, but I wanted to do something that was personal and unique to his story. And so I did a little digging around on social media. And there's this book that some of you might have read called Good to Great by Jim Collins. It's a big read book, and it's often quoted in a lot of research studies. And my mentor always brought it up in conversations. And so I thought I would try and reach out to the author to see if I could get a signed copy of the book and a personal note for his birthday coming up. And so without further ado, I went to Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, email, everything possible. And within a couple of days, I heard back from him with an email. He CC'd his team and he said, Joel, I'd be happy to help. And I could even throw in a copy for yourself. And He also covered the shipping from Amazon or whatever. And I was blown away by the author, Jim, being way too busy, way too professional, never meeting me in person, not knowing who I am or the mentor, saying, I'm inspired by this note and the creativity. Happy to send a book right to your door in Vancouver. And I think I like to share that story as an example of the people on the other ends of the screen, although they're the successful or busy or have a lot going on, if we're willing to ask and to be creative, you never know what fun idea might come to life. And the best part is, if we're able to use those ideas to sow kindness into the lives of others, it can be super inspiring to see that impact in that other person's life and you just being a messenger. So that's the story.
That's great. And I think that's a really big thing that I think you definitely represent, is that you're never too important or too busy to be nice. So I definitely agree with that. Something else that you mentioned, of course, you live in Vancouver. Do you think, kind of, when we're going through our careers, when we're looking on LinkedIn, when we're trying to connect with different professionals, does location matter? Do you
Mm.
think that just because you're Vancouver, would you want to focus your opportunities there? Because a lot of us are located in the Toronto area, should we be focusing on Toronto, especially in light of the global pandemic that we're all experiencing? Do you think location really matters when we're trying to do our outreach?
Mm. Yeah, that's a loaded question and I love it. And I think your graduating class will be the first group to take that question head on, where you used to be the only one in a zip code in Toronto. Now there's no telling that the role you're applying for might have other competitors from other graduating schools.
Yeah.
But to flip that on its head, Nick, and for the people listening, that same thing goes for that Google role in San Francisco or that really interesting artist role in New York. And I think the same way that the doors open in Toronto, the global doors also open around the world for the people listening. And I think where this comes down to a science is building your trustworthy presence online so that you have the ability to pick up and work where you please. I was super surprised. I had some inbound requests from two people in Ontario that I've never met before to help with marketing work. And they were both respected brands and they'd been following my social media content over the last year or two. And as a result, we were able to get on a call, have a conversation, and agree on a contract that I could help them with, even though we had never met in person. And I think my advice to you is be knowledgeable, be understanding that the world is changing and it will continue to change. And we need to build our story and our career in a place that can be global if we need to move our life or we need to do online work. But I think also be confident that who you are and the experience you have can be leveraged in different areas or different opportunities. And I think the gig economy, which is doing, part-time work or things not under one employer, will only continue to grow. And I think if you're cultivating stories and areas of trust and presence online, as well as trusted references or referrals from professors or mentors, I truly think you have nothing to be worried about, but only more opportunity. But if you're just doing the same old thing, having your paper resume, and counting on that one role being available in your neighborhood when you go home this summer, I think that's when it does get challenging. Does that answer help?
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I totally agree with that. We are in a world and we are in a place where the internet has no bounds. So I think, whether that is a job in Vancouver, in Toronto, New York, San Francisco, anywhere that you could possibly find yourself, I think there's a great way for you to reach out and connect with someone there, get more information. I think, you always should be making an informed decision when it comes to your career. I think why not reach out? Why not get that information? I think that's a great point.
For sure. And to finish that point, Nick, not even only on the working front, think about it on the volunteer front or the mentorship front or even the business front. I think we can now educate and build relationships all from our laptop if we have good Wi-Fi connection. And I challenge you, if you have an inspiring person that you're wanting to connect with a Zoom call and they live in San Francisco or in Australia or in London, you can still build that relationship. And that could then lead to a career down the road. And so I think be optimistic, but be aware of how you're cultivating that. But I think it can only provide more exciting opportunities.
For sure. So something you also mentioned at the beginning was about building a personal brand. So why do you think building a personal brand is so important today?
Great question. So to turn this one back on the listeners, just to have a think, because I know I did this today. When you go to a coffee shop, get a haircut, go to a restaurant or a hotel for the first time in a city that you don't know, what's the first thing you do?
Google it.
You Google it. You Yelp it, you Google it, you look it up online, you ask a friend, you drop a DM to an Instagram, drop me your recommendations. That in the small business world is what is happening on the online recruitment world. It takes so much time to go through 300 resumes when if I was looking for an ambitious student in the Toronto area, why would I post an ad when I could just ask Nick to connect me with one of his friends that lives in Toronto? That is the power of a personal brand. To be discoverable, trustable, and able to build a relationship with someone before you ever meet them in person or hire them for work. And I think the same way that we're now searching to save time and convenience, but also validate trust with Google reviews or comments or references, that is happening in the working world. And whether we like it or not, it's up to us to decide, are we going to build equity into what our personal presence is online? Or are we going to wait for a company or someone else to decide what that is for us? And so I like to educate and inspire students to say, if you have a couple hours of your time each week just to update your story or who you are on your platforms, you never know where it can lead to future opportunities down the line. Because I think the working world is only becoming more technology focused. How does that help for an answer?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. But what do you think are ways that we can stand out even more? Because I get what you're saying, and I think I totally agree. Personal brand is so important. Whether you need to make that connection, whether you need to, you're looking for a different role, whether you just want to connect with someone to get a signed copy of a book. How do we stand out? How do we make sure? I know we talked about student charisma, but are there other ways that we can stand out or other strategies we can use?
I think my answer for this would be try and build as much of a human presence as you can before you meet with that person or whatever that idea might be. So the resume, as great as it is very one-dimensional. And I say one-dimensional because it's usually just words with a couple different sizes and a couple different fonts. And when I get that resume, it just speaks in a one-dimensional way. But if I look deeper into that person and they have a video interview and they have a podcast and they have an online art studio and an app they built and whatever that might be, it adds almost a two-dimensional factor to who they are as a professional, because now I can interact with these pieces of story to get to know them as a person. And then the third dimension I would say is getting to know someone face to face. And I think if we're able to look at things in our professional community that we're building in the 2D and 3D capacity, I think we'll be able to exponentially increase the trust and the presence we're able to have before we meet with someone. And so it is difficult, Nick, depending on the industry or the niche that you're digging into. But like anything, if you take a deep enough look online, you'll find the inspiring people that are already doing it in your industry. And so if you have a particular niche of business, communications, or whatever you might be for this interview today, look at who those top industry leaders are and see what they're doing in their line of work, and then how you can reverse engineer that in your own life. If they're a marketing professional and they do a Q&A every month with marketing professionals around the world, how could you reverse engineer that and do that in Toronto once a month? And I think by understanding your story and looking for the industry leaders in your own circle of work, that can usually be the inspiring advice you need to do that in your own life before you've even gotten into your career.
For sure. And I think I totally agree with that point. Now, once we do make that connection, because it's likely someone we never met before, what tips would you give to starting that relationship or trying to create them wanting to come back and talk to you again, whether that's through mentorship or just someone you can always follow up with whenever you want to look out for a job or just need advice on anything?
Yeah, I think a preface to this would be, we do have to understand that they are human. They might have just had a baby. They might have just got married. They might have, just had a tragedy happen in their own life. And so as amazing as our intent is, we have to understand that we have to work around these people and their lives to get their time. And so I like to say that to remind people that if you send a note and you don't get a response back, don't lose heart. Just understand that they might have just moved or things might have been busy in their life. And as much as amazing your intent is, they might just be in an interesting season. But point number one, I think, would be identify where they are most active outside of their work. Do they have a podcast? Do they have a Twitter thread? Do they have a YouTube series? Do they write a book? Be in that world and understand that you probably have to meet them there versus where you are. And so as much as I love LinkedIn, if I'm wanting to connect with an inspiring CMO at Pepsi or Coke or a brand I'm wanting to chat with, they might be more active on Instagram or Twitter. And so I'm going to have to jump over there to have a conversation with them. Point number two would be being specific and doing your research. So I think before you reach out and send a note, make sure you know who they are, what they stand for, and what values they have as a person. And then point number three would be catering your idea or your outreach to be encouragement focused with a lens of curiosity. So instead of going in right for the ask, thank them for the work that they've done or the things that they've put out in the world that's inspired you as a student. And then finish with the curiosity or question note to ask if they'd ever have time or maybe an idea or piece of advice to pass off. After you've done those three steps, I'd say give it a week or two, maybe even a month, to do what they've told you. And then point number four would be to follow up and share the results of the progress that have happened. So say I find the CMO at Pepsi, she's on Twitter, and I say hello and I thank her for her amazing podcast. And I ask her, what's the best marketing book you've read? I'm really looking to diversify my learning in the food and beverage industry. And I know Pepsi is the best industry leader in this category. And she says, actually, this amazing professor from Ryerson wrote this book. And I'd say, no way, I'm a student from Ryerson. I mentioned the mascot. I don't know what it is, but you could build that rapport. I would go read that book, get to know that prof, and then in a month, I'd come back and say, let's say the CMO, her name's Laura. Laura, I read the book and really appreciate your thoughts. Would you ever have time to connect for a chat about other books or resources you have for a young professional? And right away, I've given a month or two to giving her time and space. She's had time to get to know me, the great student I am at Ryerson, and my passion for the food and beverage industry. And when we get on that Zoom call, you can guarantee that we'll have some fun similarities and values to bring into that meeting. And as you can see from that story, that 4 or 5 step process, that's a lot more effective than just sending a cold message to say, hey, Laura, could I meet? I'm looking for your marketing internship at Pepsi. And compared to that, you'll be that much more surprised at the relationship that can form when Laura says, hey, so-and-so, great that you reached out for that internship, but did you know you're actually qualified for a project manager role at Starbucks? I'm friends with the other executive. I'll connect you guys for a coffee. Boom, just like that, you've built a relationship rapport, that you have this relationship for life, and it's not just a short message over social media. Sorry for the monologue, but hopefully that story helped.
That was great. I'm gonna write that down. I like that. That was really good. So in your grad year of university, what steps did you take? Because I know many of our attendees, a lot of them are first year, some of them are in their grad year, people like myself are getting close to graduation. What are some steps that we can take either kind of as we're close to graduating into just getting into the workforce? So whether that be kind of building our personal brand, building up our LinkedIn, what are some steps that you took and steps that you'd recommend that we should all be taking?
Great question. I think where I'd want to give advice with this is understand that as early as possible, you want to get your first internship or volunteer experience that aligns with your passion. So what I tried to do actually in my 3rd and 4th year of university is I would ask my professors to turn the class into a co-op or internship with a local company that I knew. And that was a great way for me to get connected with a company, get my class experience, and learn about a company and how they operate for a future career opportunity. And so we're sitting here, it's November 8th, and you're probably going to be graduating in the spring. My number one piece of advice is try and connect with a local professional or abroad and see if you can volunteer a couple months to get an internship experience under your belt before you graduate. And I think you'll be surprised at how that internship experience, even if it's just a little bit of time, you'll be able to learn a lot about yourself and how you function as a professional. And sometimes that internship experience can turn right into a post-grad opportunity if you're able to. And I think I want to be honest that a bigger firm like a Shopify, a Facebook, a Snapchat, whatever it might be in the GTA area, they're going to be more difficult to create those opportunities. And so you probably want to go with a family, friend connection, or maybe someone on social media that you can say, hey, I noticed you don't have a social media presence on Instagram. I'm looking at a class project or an internship opportunity, and I'm wondering if I can volunteer my time to build a marketing plan for your social media. Because guaranteed, everyone on this call, you guys are social media experts. Gen Z, you know what you're doing. And so I think that's a great way to start. If you don't feel like you want to grow in social media, pick a different skill and say, hey, I'm trying to work on my coding. Could I maybe build you guys an app? Or I'm looking at creating a podcast. Could I try and create a podcast for you guys since you're my favorite retail shop, coffee shop, or restaurant in my hometown city? And I think by looking at trying to create these unique internship opportunities, it creates incredible momentum before you graduate to put something on your personal brand or your resume to say, this is something I've done and this is what I can do. The other point would be try and connect for great conversations with as many alumni or inspiring people in your area. And I think that's a simple task, such as reaching out to one or two people a week to ask, hey, I have some time over Christmas break and was wondering if maybe I could learn a bit more about your story and how you got to where you are, over Zoom or possibly over coffee if you're both feeling safe. And so I think building up some volunteer internship, building up some professional contacts, and then third would be possibly building up some sort of passion project that you can do for free at home and on Wi-Fi. There's a lot of things you can do in that realm that require no job application that you can start doing right now. So I think those are the 3 buckets I'd recommend. And usually within one of those 3 buckets, you'll be able to pick something that can help you post-grad from those 3 areas.
Okay, perfect. So just for everyone in attendance, we are going to get to the Q&A in a little bit. But my last question for you is, this whole chat, we called it Stop Waiting and Start Creating. So what's something that you think all of us can do today to start creating?
This is my favorite point. I would recommend to stop, reflect on this amazing conference that the team put together, and share one takeaway, one thing you learned, one way you grew, one speaker you liked. It doesn't have to be me because I lost Wi-Fi connection, but pick something and share a takeaway on your social media. I would recommend, if you're not comfortable with LinkedIn, make it your first LinkedIn post. Grab a screenshot of us right now, take some of the team, some of the speakers, and share one takeaway or one learning that you've had from this incredible 2-day event. And I think you'll find that sharing what we've learned is often the easiest way to create a piece of content. So that's my tip.
I think that's great. And of course, we will be having our awards later on. So if anyone wins there, they could do that. And we also have a LinkedIn giveaway. So that's actually perfect. So again, if anyone does have any questions, we're going to start going to the Q&A. So please feel free to drop it there. But I'll start off with some of the questions we've gotten already. So the first one is from an anonymous attendee. And Joel, do you have any tips for reaching out to job recruiters?
Great question. I think my 3 points with that would be personal. So address them by their first name, know their story, know their working history. After you've been personal, you want to be genuine. You want to share the context of why you're reaching out, what drew you to the idea. And then thirdly, ask for some sort of learning or material to find out more about the opportunity. So maybe that might be, I'm looking into this role, I saw it posted online, and I'm wondering, do you know of any alumni or colleagues that I could chat with to learn more about the opportunity? And right away, you've presented a personal, polite, and genuine request to connect with that recruiter. And I think you'll find that sets you much more further apart from the other people that just send them a note to ask if they can get hired.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think that's definitely something a lot of the people at this event could probably take away, is that, we should start opening up these opportunities. So I think that's a great way to reach out. Something from Grace is that now that LinkedIn has stories, which I just got the update and I was talking with someone earlier that LinkedIn now has stories, which is kind of cool. What do you think is the best way to use this feature? And what sort of content should we be posting on our LinkedIn story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I think first point would be try and use it as much as possible, but within reason. We don't want to be the over poster that people tune out of and unfollow, but find something unique that you would want to capture or share with your community on a weekly basis. I think LinkedIn, like a lot of these technology companies, they will explore new features to gain feedback or more relationship with their users. And so I think if you're confident, feel free to use it. I think the only point is make sure you don't overuse it so that people are tuning out, but use it in a way that builds more of your story and a way that you can connect with other professionals. So I think my point of advice would be find out what you're passionate about, find out something you can post, once or twice a week, and then start doing that on a regular basis. And then maybe after a month or two, review what you've learned or what opportunities have maybe come from it.
Okay, I think that's great. And I think, you can let me know if you think otherwise, but I think Instagram stories and Snapchat stories, more like the personal and social side, but I think the LinkedIn stories, I think that's really smart for sharing like thoughtful, impactful articles and messages. So I think that is great. The next question we had was, what is a piece of advice that you got that you didn't think was meaningful at the time, but was something that ended up really, really resonating with you?
I think one that jumps to mind right away is the quote that shares, who or the people that you work with or know kind of shape the work that you do. And another way to say that is you are who you hang out with, those top 5 people. Like you are who you hang out with. And I think as you leave Ryerson and you stay in touch with some of these classmates, probably not all of them, it will be interesting to see how your life trajectory shapes as a result of who you're closest with. And I think in my life, I have seen that be a true fact. And I think my encouragement would be try and do a regular evaluation of not only the people, but the resources you read online, and make sure that the people and the resources are shaping you into the person that you want to become. Because at the end of the day, we start talking like and we start becoming who those individuals are. And so that's probably the quote I'd share.
Okay, perfect. And then as a student, sorry, let me say that again. As a student that is just starting to gain experience in the work field, and when COVID hit, lost this experience, how can I get back up? Because I've been spending months searching and I'm not sure where to look anymore.
And they didn't mention their industry?
No, they didn't mention their industry. I'm not sure if they would be able to send another chat or send another question on that.
No worries.
But yeah, I guess this is more in general.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to know that the world is going through a pandemic, and that is something we have to accept. And these things do happen, and it's not at the result of, who we are as people. And so I think step into confidence that a lot of the world is going through what you're going through. And as much as tips and advice and books are helpful, we have to understand that the world's in a unique space. So I just want to preface with that. Secondly, I would say document your story and what happened, because I know given time, you will get back up on your feet and you'll want to reflect on the story of how you overcame this obstacle. So on a Google Doc or Notes app, write down what happened, journal and reflect, and go over that with a friend or family member that you can trust to help evaluate what that job experience was and the good things that you were able to take from that. The third thing I'd say was set specific goals around committing time during the day to focus on next opportunities in your industry. Don't invest your whole day, but pick pockets of time, maybe 2 to 3 hours during the day, that you're wanting to invest solely on finding relevant opportunities in your area of expertise. And I say that because I think it's so healthy to get outside, stay active, continue working on yourself as a person, but then find maybe a 2 to 4 hour block where you can invest to look for specific career opportunities. And then the next step would be try and connect with a couple individuals, whether they're hiring managers, alumni, professors, and get their advice for other opportunities they might know about in your industry. I think those would be my 4 pieces of advice. But also understand that you will land another opportunity. And I think, yeah, that's kind of the step of process that I would share.
Okay, perfect. Next one's from Eric, and it's, do you have any tips on how to be a more confident speaker? And what do you do to prepare for a TED Talk or a keynote speech?
Yeah, that's a great question. Quick story. I was the best man at one of my friends' weddings, and I was very scared of speaking. I couldn't eat all day, didn't have any of the dinner, and was writing and rewriting my speech probably 20 times leading up to the talk. And I then heard from a couple friends, Joel, in the business world, you'll have to start getting confident in your speaking. And so they encouraged me, start looking for small ways you can grow and become a comfortable public speaker in your day-to-day life. So little things like, you know, uh, maybe chatting with people at a family friend gathering, or maybe chatting with a local school, or volunteering and seeing how you can help give back. And I think creating those baby steps of momentum to build into your confidence were really helpful for me. And then the second point was understand that public speaking becomes a lot easier when you're passionate about the topic and you're telling stories versus sharing data. And those have been both things for me that I've used in my career to align speaking at events or conferences that I know I'll be passionate about, and that I also feel really excited when I get to share about it. And I think if you can do that in your own life, and you can find those smaller ways to build momentum within a matter of good enough time, I can guarantee anyone could be on the TEDx stage if they take those steps.
Okay, that's really great. And I think that's super great, especially for presentations such as this, or presentations such as our case competition. That is always a way to help build it up. I know we're a little pressed for time, so I'll try and get a few more in, or maybe we'll get 1 or 2 more in. So I'll just take this next one, which is, I'm a first-year student. I try really hard, but my grades don't reflect that. And I'm confused as to how can I work smarter? And that's what everyone says, work smart, not hard. But how? That disappoints me. And in the future, I want to build my own business and create stuff. My grades just make me think that might not be able to happen. So I guess this question is kind of asking, like, how can we work smart, not hard, even though, let's say, our grades might not reflect that?
I want to preface this with saying university is a means of education. And I think the schools of thought that we can be influenced and educated by today are radically growing outside of the university realm. And so I am a believer that university is a great place for relationships, for understanding, for being challenged, for meeting great friends. But don't lose hope if your grades aren't the top best ones to reflect to your friends or your parents back home. I think understand that we are all blessed differently, some academic, some creative, and some extracurricular, sports, art, media. And I think understand that a grade is just a reflection of that particular category. If you know what you want to do, see how you can take a creative shortcut and start building that experience versus waiting for possibly a class grade to validate that. And so if you want to be a business owner, like you said, still focus on school and still work hard, but start meeting with other business owners in the category of business that you want to learn, and ask what advice they would have on how they first started. Did they focus on particular classes? Did they start learning in other ways outside of university? And try and see university as an education trajectory, but not a means to an end. We used our university degree to get to a certain role or an idea in our career. And I think if we can start doing both, you'll find that the path to that career becomes a lot more easier.
Okay. That's definitely something super important. And I know there's also another question about motivation. I
Yeah.
think that kind of ties into that. Um, just staying connected and staying driven with something that you're passionate about. I think, take those 2 steps, try and find something that you're passionate about or that you think is relevant to you or that you think can help you in your career and move forward with that. So I think that's all the time we have for right now. If we didn't get to your question, apologize for that. I believe we are going to be moving on to our next speaker, but I do want to thank you so much, Joel, for taking the time today to meet with us. I know different time zone. I know we're trying to schedule meetings before, and we just have to make sure we're always in the same time zone. And you're an incredible speaker. I'm sure everyone listening today took something away from your presentation. Did you have any final words of encouragement that you wanted to tell any of our attendees today?
I think I'd want to finish with, understanding that even though you might not have a lot of work experience, know that you have so much talent and story and perseverance kind of under you. And if you choose to see that as a channel for good and for new ideas and creativity, I think you'll be an incredible inspiration to other generations in the working world with the work that you can do before you get into your career. So that's just something I wanted to finish with the people that are watching the webinar.
All right. Thanks so much, Joel. I really appreciate it. And if any of you are interested, please do feel free to connect with Joel on LinkedIn. As we mentioned, he is very, very good with social media, and I'm sure Joel will be happy to talk to any of you. And again, Joel, really appreciate you taking the time out of your day today. And thanks so much for attending. And we look forward to chatting soon.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nick.
And I'll pass it on over to Celine now.
Thank you so much, Joel. That was greatly appreciated. And again, your wise words always resonates with all of us, so it's greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for that.
Thanks for having me.
And now we will be moving on